We intend to conduct the boarding of your vessel.
Today, the US Department of War released these images. Forces boarding a stateless vessel it said was transporting sanctioned oil from Iran. America's response to the Iranian seizure yesterday of 3 ships in the Strait of Hormuz. A tit for tat as the presidential rhetoric continues to climb. Donald Trump writing on Truth Social, "I have ordered the United States Navy to shoot and kill any boat, small boats though they may be. There is to be no hesitation."
Mr. President, Secretary
And
Hicks
so, a major naval threat the day after the Pentagon forced out this man, Navy Secretary John Phelan, ousted in the middle of war, just like the Army Chief of Staff before him. As for delayed peace talks, the president blamed Iranian division in a Truth Social post with the odd grammatical slip-up. Iran is having a very hard time figuring out who their leader is, he wrote. They just don't know. The infighting is between the hardliners, who have been losing badly on the battlefield, and the moderates, who are not very moderate at all, but gaining respect. Is crazy.
Let's level set on where we are.
The White House press secretary said the president was giving the divided Iranians time to unify, so Operation Epic Fury was on hold. But she said the naval blockade amounted to Operation Economic Fury.
We are completely strangling their economy through this blockade. They're losing $500 million a day. The Karg Island is completely full. They can't move oil in and out. They can't even pay their own people as a result of this economic leverage that President Trump has inflicted over them.
But for all the economic pain, on Capitol Hill, the Treasury Secretary faced pointed questions about previous decisions to ease sanctions on both Iranian and Russian oil.
Do you disagree that Iran has received significant additional revenue from their sales of oil because of sanctions relief?
I couldn't disagree more.
Okay. Do you disagree that Russia has received significant additional revenue from the sanctions relief?
I couldn't disagree more.
Okay. Why did you relieve the sanctions against Russian and Iranian oil?
Think of it this way, sir. There's the Strait of Hormuz.
Familiar with it?
We're all familiar with it now. The waterway being fought over in the latest phase of the Iran war, because everyone knows the Strait of Hormuz can be used to hold the entire world economy hostage. During this war, I've spoken to a number of people who have been in the room when previous administrations have tried to decide whether they would take action like this. And they told me that there were 2 red flags that always stopped them. The first were warnings around the Strait of Hormuz. Never before had Iran tried to exploit that waterway. They've now shown how big the impact could be. So big that the Americans did decide to ease sanctions on Iranian oil. And Democrats in the House and the Senate behind me claim that the Iranians have been able to sell up to 140 million barrels of oil worth up to $14 billion. The other red flag was the idea that you could get regime change, but in the wrong direction, that this could amplify the harder line voices in Iran. And clearly, it looks like that might be happening right now, that division in Iran might be why the US-Iran peace talks are not going ahead at the moment. However, there have been talks here in DC between representatives from Lebanon and Israel, hoping to make some progress on that side of this war, with the president suggesting at the moment that perhaps both the Israeli Prime Minister and the Lebanese Prime Minister could come here to continue with that. Right now, we are in a new phase of this war, and it is all about that shipping, that waterway that has become so critical.
Anushka, in the glare of the Washington sun, thank you very much indeed. Well, hours before talks to extend the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire begin in Washington, Lebanon's Prime Minister has accused Israel of war crimes after the killing of a journalist in an airstrike. Israel says it is reviewing the incident. The Committee to Protect Journalists has described Israel's disregard for the lives of journalists in the region as unparalleled. At least 264 journalists have been killed by the Israeli military across the region since 2023. 210 of them Palestinian journalists in Gaza. 31 were killed in a single attack in Yemen. And in Lebanon, at least 14 journalists have also been killed. Amal Khalil, the latest death in a growing death toll. She worked for Al Akbar, a left-leaning independent newspaper known for its pro-Hezbollah stance, and was targeted alongside her colleague while reporting from Israel's occupation zone in southern Lebanon. Thousands of people gathered in Beirut for her funeral today. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Porrick O'Brien, was there.
Don't shoot the messenger. Don't send a missile through the roof of the house she's trapped in. Amal Khalil's funeral today, a time to reflect on those basic principles being willfully forgotten. She won't be, though, certainly not here in her hometown. Throughout this week, Amal and her colleague Zainab Faraj were reporting from their patch, the part of southern Lebanon now under Israeli control. The story, the wholesale demolition of villages and homes there by the Israelis. According to her colleagues, just before 3 p.m. yesterday afternoon, a convoy, including the 2 journalists, was hit by an Israeli drone. 2 men in the car in front of Amal's were killed. Amal and Zainab sheltered in a house nearby. And from there, she called a colleague and friend. We spoke to her at the funeral.
وأنا تواصلت مع أمال الساعة 2:57 وقلت لها أمال أنت منيحة؟ قال أنا منيحة وتم استهداف السيارة اللي أمامنا. وبهيدي اللحظة خرجت من سيارتها واختبأت ببيت من 3 طوابق.
Her colleagues alerted the authorities, which set in train an established process, including UNIFIL, the UN's presence in Lebanon. They alert the IDF in an attempt to de-escalate so that a rescue can take place. Rescue workers tried to get to the location but were prevented from doing so. Their vehicle was shot at. The IDF deny trying to stop the rescue. We don't know what was happening in and around the house that afternoon, but at 4:30, the Israelis launched an airstrike on the building the journalists were in. 7 hours after that, Amal's body was recovered. Zainab had been seriously injured and spoke from her hospital bed today about that hour and a half trapped with her friend. Is there any doubt in your mind that the Israelis knew who she was, knew she was in that house, and dropped a bomb on it anyway?
No, at all.
Part of the reason she's so sure, Amal and her colleagues had received death threats recently over the phone from an Israeli number. Amal worked for the Hezbollah-aligned newspaper Al-Akhbar. This isn't unusual. Lebanon's media ecosystem reflects all the country's politics, and Amal was liked and respected across the board. But also, that doesn't matter. What matters is this. Under international humanitarian law, journalists are afforded the same protections as civilians. If that journalist has a particular sympathy with a particular cause, that doesn't mean that protection is removed. And that is why the Prime Minister of Lebanon described what happened to Amal as a blatant war crime. Over 250 journalists have been killed by the Israelis in Gaza, Lebanon and the West Bank in the last 18 months. If there's rolling conflict in your backyard, local journalists become war correspondents, become heroes in their communities.
بتحارب بالكلمة وبالكاميرا. أنا بتصير مثل أمال.
Amal Khalil had a reputation as a generous mentor and friend to up-and-coming journalists. Lots of people wanted to be her when they grow up. Now remember, all of this is happening against the backdrop of a supposed temporary ceasefire here in Lebanon. There will be talks in the coming hours. The Lebanese want that ceasefire extended for another month. The IDF told us in a statement in relation to this incident where Amal died yesterday. They said that the IDF, had identified 2 vehicles that left a military structure used by Hezbollah and crossed what they describe as the forward defense line in southern Lebanon. That's the edge of the occupation zone they're talking about. It went on to say in the statement that its Air Force then struck one of the vehicles and the nearby structure. The statement acknowledged that 2 journalists were injured, but the IDF in the statement did not acknowledge Amal Khalil's death, about the only ones who haven't, I should say. And in the statement, as you'd expect, the IDF went on to say yet again that they do not target journalists and that the details of the incident are under review. Don't hold your breath.
Porrick in Beirut, thank you very much for your piece there. Well, earlier I spoke to the Lebanese cabinet minister, Kamal Shahadi. I began by asking him if he agreed with Lebanon's prime minister that the killing of Amal Khalil was a war crime.
The prime minister speaks on behalf of the whole government when he says that. And in fact, unfortunately, the latest victim is one of 6 or 7 journalists who've either been targeted deliberately or were killed because of their location. But surely the Israeli army did not take into account that they were journalists and they should have avoided targeting them, just like they have targeted ambulances in many cases.
And do you have any hope that there may ever be justice for those victims and their families?
Justice starts with first having a lasting ceasefire and pursuing the government's diplomatic initiative and reaching a final settlement so that we avoid any future wars. To me, that is the best thing we can do to the victims and their families, but also for the whole country.
And do you think that these negotiations, which are about to start again in Washington, can actually come up with some lasting settlement if Hezbollah isn't even around the table?
I think we can get there with U.S. support, with U.S. sponsorship, and with a lot of support to the Lebanese armed forces, because that's what's needed today. So for the government to enforce any ceasefire on the Lebanese side of the border. So in answer to your question, Hezbollah should not be at the table. Hezbollah is not an official party. They do not represent the government. They are in the government. They have 2 ministers out of 24 members of the government. Now, how we as Lebanese conduct these negotiations internationally is one thing. How we build support internally for the implementation of any agreement that we reach with the Israelis, that's an internal matter, and I think we can get there. This government has taken the right decisions to consider any military activity by Hezbollah as illegal.
And I just wonder finally, Minister, the fact that your country still exists is a small miracle in its own right. But do you not feel, or rather, what does it feel like as a minister of a government where you are literally a hostage between Hezbollah, Iran, Israel, and indeed the goodwill of the United States?
Well, the goodwill of the United States does not put us in an uncomfortable position, I have to say.
Unless they get bored.
No, you see, that's, it could be that they lose interest in peace in Lebanon, but I think both Lebanese and Israeli interests are important enough to the United States. There's a huge Lebanese community in the US. There are lots of Lebanese Americans who are very influential, and there's a strong Lebanese lobby in favor of Lebanon. But more importantly, we are a country that considers, we have 6,000 years of history. We are, it's no surprise that we have survived. We have a history and we have a future. And I know that it sounds like, yes, the odds are stacked against us, but our only option is negotiations. Other countries have done it, they've succeeded. We're gonna do it this time. We're coming to this decades too late, but we're gonna do it.
Kamal Shahadi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.